Hello, my wonderful souls. Today's discussion is pedophilia. I know it's like descending into a rabbit hole, but I thought it's important to make a separate video on child sexual abuse. In my last video, we discussed sexual assault trauma and how to heal it, and most of the tips will still apply to child abuse, so please check it out as well. When abuse happens when we're children, right in the middle of our initial understanding of the world, you can imagine how it might play out when you have nothing to fall back on in terms of safety net. All you have is betrayal, a script that this world is here to hurt you, you can trust no one, people who were supposed to care for you and protect you fail to do so, that's your foundation. But I'm here to remind you, it is possible to renovate this rusty base, and you can enjoy life and build fulfilling relationships and access your life purpose. No matter how old you are now or how long ago you experienced abuse, it's never too late to begin your healing journey. Welcome to Universe Soul. My name is Karina, I'm a psychotherapist, and I'm very happy to see you here. First of all, defining child sexual abuse is a very complex problem because what is acceptable differs across cultures and jurisprudences. There are places on this planet where it's not a big deal to marry a 10-year-old girl to a 40-something man. Every year, millions of girls are forced into child marriage, which is a violation of children's rights. Children, they cannot provide sexual consent. They're not developmentally ready to make these decisions, and it's adults' responsibilities to set boundaries. And child marriage leads to additional issues like gender-based violence, child labor, complications during pregnancy, female genital mutilation, denial of right to education. They are more vulnerable to sexually transmitted infections like HIV, and many develop mental health problems. But despite these horrendous consequences, many communities around the world they force girls into marriages, mostly due to lack of education, gender inequality, and poverty. The Western world defines child sexual abuse as forcing or enticing a child to take part in sexual activities, not necessarily in a violent way, and not only penetrative acts count, but also non-penetrative. For example, masturbation, kissing, rubbing, and even non-contact activities involving children in looking at sexual images, or in the production of porn, or grooming a child online. In UK, around 1 in 20 children have been sexually abused. That's only official stats, and only one country where child sexual abuse is punishable. Just let it sink for a moment. There are also dark figures, meaning that only a fraction of sexual offenses against children are disclosed to the police, and the majority of cases are swept under the rug. The dark figures are likely to be huge because many victims hesitate to reveal the abuse, especially if it was carried out by a close family member or a friend. And the extent to which some individuals commit crimes elsewhere, for example when they travel to third world countries to abuse children, is almost impossible to investigate. Who are the perpetrators exactly? Mostly they are men, about 9 out of every 10 cases. Interestingly, often other children abuse children, it's not rare. Generally, the abuser knows a child. Despite what we see in movies and on the news, abuse by a stranger in a van is quite atypical. Who is exactly more vulnerable to child sexual abuse? Most likely females, those who are disabled or less healthy, unwanted children, most likely born in the middle of economic instability or other difficult conditions. The age group is mostly between 10 to 15 years old, but there are some rare cases when even babies are sexually abused. In regard to boys, those younger than 13, from ethnic minority groups living in poverty, and those raised by single mothers are at the highest risk of possible molestation. But of course, these are just average assumptions, and children may be abused from all sorts of backgrounds. Why would someone want sex with a child? Before we jump into some theories, I just want to emphasize that most sex crimes against children are perpetrated not because the person is sexually attracted to children, but because children are an easy target. Children by nature are curious, trusting, innocent, down to earth, without many expectations. They crave a connection, so it's easier to approach them, promise things to them, and use them compared to adults who are able to see the various shades of grey, if you know what I mean. So children are chosen opportunistically because they're more available. Usually in this group of sex offenders you can find confused teenagers, people with serious mental disabilities, those with antisocial personality disorder, people coming from dysfunctional family dynamics, and those seeking partners in children. These people are most likely will display impulse control disorders. They experience strong urges to engage in problematic behavior, but they don't have a specific sexual preference for children. If they get an opportunity to abuse an adult and get away with it, they will do it as well. But some people are sexually attracted to children specifically. One explanation is that their brains may be wired differently. Many experience serious head injuries in their childhood. And trauma such as falling and hitting your head could cut off the supply of oxygen, causing cell death and brain damage. This may relate to lower intelligence levels, impaired cognitive function, poor educational achievement, which we often observe among pedophiles. The lower perpetrator's IQ is, the younger the child they abuse is. Pedophiles also exhibit certain other abnormalities in brain structure affecting emotion regulation, memory retention, and many other things crucial for communication between different regions of the brain. Some researchers suggest there is an anomalous neurological link between parental instincts and sexual arousal, meaning that instead of nurturing feelings, pedophiles feel desire when they see children. Another theory, high levels of testosterone influence their cravings, and therapies to lower hormone levels in the system to reduce pedophilic thoughts are proposed. Genetic evidence for pedophilia is inconclusive. Heritability seems to be small, less than 15% of risk when it comes to fantasies involving children, whereas when it comes to other psychiatric disorders, for instance bipolar disorder, this risk reaches 60%. Many child predators went through the abuse themselves when they were children. Not necessarily sexual, could be physical abuse or neglect. So possibly the development of their brains was affected by PTSD. An abusive childhood also leads to low self-esteem, poor social skills, lack of coping skills, inability to connect to others in a meaningful way, and mental health problems. So people choose to engage with children because it offers them a bigger comfort and less stress. But of course we need to remember that not everyone who was abused in their childhood became a child molester. Researching pedophilia is rather difficult because people who think about children but never act on it unlikely will admit it and agree to take part in research. Mostly we research offenders, but they don't represent the whole group. So the ultimate question whether someone is born with pedophilia or it develops because of their environment remains unresolved. Pedophiles usually exhibit amplified cognitive distortions. They often believe that me having sex with a child is a good way to teach about sex, or sex with a teenager won't cause any emotional damage, or I'm justified to have sex with my stepdaughter because her mother doesn't want sex, or my child owns me because I'm his dad. They often deny the seriousness of the abuse and they see children as objects. They may blame the child for seducing them, or they try to protect children from a dangerous world outside. For example, when someone holds a child captive so he or she won't mix with terrible people. Ironically, they are this terrible person now, but of course they don't see it, or they pretend they don't see it. No surprise, there is more child abuse in areas with higher economical stress, poverty, or military conflict. And this plays out as a sinister chain of events when abusers are more likely to remain free and those abused are more likely to remain trapped. When people's environment is antisocial, violent, intense, lacks progress, creativity, expression, opportunities, it has a detrimental effect. When people's reality is absence, not abundance, when people are surviving, not living, it's not that difficult to become cruel and stop caring and to feel like you're on your own. In chaos, it's very hard for people to remember their inner beauty. A wall has been built around them, and soon enough they build their own wall. They become imprisoned on a soul level, and they master their skill of becoming cold, callous, sadistic even. They learn to deny responsibility for any harm, and they generate abuse into the outside world like it's the only way of living. Some may even kill children or get involved with child trafficking. Child abuse is built on power, control, anger, and emotional ignorance. These people, they can't connect to others on true intimacy levels beyond sex because they don't understand themselves emotionally to begin with, and they also have no idea how to sense others emotionally. And having little compassion makes people toxic, impulsive, preoccupied with an exaggerated sense of self-importance, control, power, money, drugs, porn, sex, guns, revenge, instant gratification. Child abuse, if you look closer, is the problem of the collective and just a reflection of everything that is wrong with humanity. While men commit most of abuse, it doesn't mean that women are innocent. Females also commit sexual crimes against children, but investigation into female sex offending has been mainly obstructed because of people's reluctance to accept the idea that women can sexually abuse children. The idealized expectations of women, implying the sanctity of motherhood, have caused a great deal of denial and disregard of female sexual abuse among the general public. And beside aunts, babysitters, nuns, doctors, or scout leaders who perpetrate child sexual abuse, mothers also account for sexual abuse. And this is the most provocative and mind-blowing thought. I totally get it, why you might be reluctant to accept this happens. All I ask you though is to consider it. Otherwise, if we completely neglect the fact that mothers can sexually abuse their own children, it deeply hurts those who were abused by their mothers, but are unable to share their experience and heal their trauma just because no one can even imagine this happens. To better understand it, there are several types of women who sexually abuse. Those who replicate their own childhood abuse, those who view the abuse as a love affair and mainly abuse adolescents, those who are pushed to do this by men, their partners for instance, those who offend together with men, and those who do it alone just because they can. Most of these women are developmentally immature and they search for emotional support through the abuse. In maternal sexual abuse, a mother may not be clear on boundaries, and she may see the body of her child as an extension of her own. The impact of sexual abuse tends to differ between short-term and long-term effects. Short-term effects, usually assuming first 2 years after the incident, include fearfulness, withdrawal, hostility, feelings of guilt and shame, low mood, impaired school performance, developmental delay, and exhibiting inappropriate sexual behaviors. Long-term consequences may include drug abuse and further vulnerability to all types of abuse, eating disorders, disturbed sleeping patterns, PTSD, OCD, borderline personality disorder, dissociative disorders, and inability to create intimate relationships. Children who were abused by someone they trusted immensely would often take personal responsibility for the abuse, and they believe that they have done something wrong and therefore they elicited it. As most of the research on child sexual abuse concentrates on men perpetrators, our knowledge of psychological impact of female sexual abuse remains quite limited. Adults abused by females, they report similar problems to those abused by men, like low self-esteem, inability to maintain romantic relationships, approaching sex as an obligation, experiencing high levels of anxiety and depression, in some cases psychosis. But there are complications unique to being a victim of female sexual abuse. For instance, when an abused woman has her own child, she may refuse to touch or feed her child, and she pushes away the idea of motherhood. What I find particularly worrying that they're quite often ridiculed by society and even by those who were abused by men. Hearing that females can't hurt children in the same way as men can, they don't have a dick to rape. But women can use objects, and often they use sharp objects. that make children bleed inside. Boys abused by women are also very stigmatized. For some reason, for a teenage boy to have a relationship with an older woman is seen as his advantage. He will learn all sex tricks and surely will benefit from it and will enjoy it. But this is a completely distorted view of what is really happening here and what it means for a boy to go through such ordeal. The older boys get, the more obvious it becomes to them that they were used by these women, and it shatters their world. And then they come to me or to other therapists completely broken with histories of PTSD, drug abuse, reckless behaviors, and unstable relationships. What are other public opinions and attitudes towards both perpetrators and those abused? The usual response towards pedophiles are feelings of disgust and great hatred. Many people advocate for punishment, and some claim that sex offenders shouldn't be offered a therapy because it's not going to help them, they're not going to change, and they should be labeled as dangerous for the rest of their lives. At the same time, people are very afraid and intrigued by sex offenders, and they want to know more, and this explains the high interest in true crime documentaries. Deep down, people want to find explanations. Attitudes towards female sex offenders show that people hold less negative views and are keener to display acceptance and warmth towards women compared to men. They see women as someone who probably has a good explanation why they did it, and it's easier to imagine women regretting the abuse. Of course, that's not always the case. For example, Myra Hindley, who raped and murdered 5 children together with her partner Ian back in the 60s, received a lot of hate in the past and by this day is seen as pure evil. She died in prison, by the way. What really bothers me is that not all survivors of child sexual abuse receive sympathy and needed treatment. And in some instances, people turn their backs on them and they blame them, especially when children are older. They may be seen as partially responsible for provoking the abuse. Some people see teenagers able to resist rape in the same way as adults can. Especially it can be said about boys. They are very likely to be blamed and deemed able to fight back during the attack. Another problem is our celebrity culture and people's distorted views regarding famous or financially powerful people. Like they're immune to any type of sinister manipulations and crimes against children just because they are good actors or singers or performers and so on. Achieving success in life doesn't equal, and I'll repeat, doesn't equal to integrity, kindness, humanity, responsibility, self-discipline and awareness. Of course, that's amazing when popular people are also kind human beings, but some of them use their popularity to abuse those in more vulnerable positions. They attack someone who is poor, for instance, and they know won't fight against them, against a multimillionaire who most likely donates huge amounts of money to charities, plays heroes on screen, and is happily married on the surface. Everyone thinks he's this amazing guy with a heart of gold, discounting the fact that he might be a pedophile. You need to think about abused children here, that by your failure to accept that these wonderful celebrities you adore and love, I won't name them, but lots of cases came to light in the last decade, and you know who I'm talking about, it's not just one person. That they might have skeletons in the closet, and by you denying that they're capable of it, you deny healing to those people who were physically and psychologically damaged by them, and that's catastrophic and unfair. How do pedophiles groom children? The most common tactic is actually not violence, but paying special attention to a child and making them feel unique, chosen for something magical other children won't get. They may lure children with phrases such as, I can show you puppies, or I can take you to a fun fair, or I have the candy you want, or I will show you what real love is, depends on age, of course. The predator will try to end up in a situation in which the child will be undressed at some point, like going to a swimming pool or changing into pajamas, and where they can also flash their body to the child. The first physical contact is unlikely to be sexual. It will be more like an arm around the shoulder, touching hair, and this is done to slowly break child's boundaries and allow first sexual contact to come across as vague or accidental. They might elicit child's natural curiosity about sex by showing them pornography or using dirty jokes. Pedophiles may offer support or sympathy to a child when others, like parents or friends or school, disappoint them. It's a wolf in a sheep's skin situation when the groomer, in fact, isolates the child. They may say, "No one understands you, but I do," or "I was also that lonely when I was 12," or "Trust me, I will get you out of this." Some parents may even be pleased that their kid has found a mentor or role model, that someone looks after them and also cares and helps the family out. The higher families trust in the molester, the less likely the child will be able to avoid harassment. To minimize the fear of discovery, the predator may share a secret with the child, expecting him or her to do the same in return by not telling anyone about their precious time together. And this bonds the predator and the child, and it becomes very difficult to escape. To make sure your child won't fall for these tactics, educate your children about sex and anatomy appropriate to their age, and don't sugarcoat it. Skipping the part "what's wrong with this world" won't do any good. They need to be aware that not all adults are friendly angels. Teach them to question any unusual physical contact between children and adults, and teach them to tell you about it. Show them they can trust you. As a parent, you should be familiar with all adults and all the children in your child's life. Who are the teachers, coaches, friends of friends, and so on? I'm not saying you need to be paranoid, but you need to be aware there is a difference. Pay attention to your children's online activity and what apps they're using. And most importantly, talk to your child, not only when it's needed. Be curious about their life and goals and support them as much as you can. How can you heal your trauma if you were abused in your childhood? The first step is your decision to heal and be willing to notice the effects of the sexual abuse you suffered as a child. Most likely, you tried to suppress your memories for a long time because otherwise it's too painful to carry on living. But here I would like you to see that even though you faced your abuse alone, you don't have to heal alone. Slowly begin dealing with your unwanted memories and suppressed feelings. In the beginning, it will cause great unease, but that's okay. You have everything to swim through these muddy waters. By doing this, you will understand the many ways sexual abuse has impacted your life. Do you see yourself as a confident person? Are you happy romantically? Are you fulfilled in your job? Do you trust anyone? Do you abuse drugs? Moving out of denial and into the truth is a powerful step for many survivors. It's okay if your life isn't perfect. It's okay to feel like you're bleeding. It's okay to be sad. Because from here, you can get better. But if you stay in a suppressed mode, you will only get what you got so far. Is it enough for you? I doubt so. The next important step is to verbalize your abuse, to give voice to it. Share your story with people who genuinely care. If you have no one, then support groups of other survivors who went through similar type of abuse will help you for sure. By realizing this wasn't your fault, that you have the right to be happy, that the truth is way better than hiding and suppressing, you will feel stronger, braver, and more resilient. Learning to give shame and guilt back to your abuser is a crucial part of your healing journey. You have a lot to mourn as a survivor of child abuse, but grieving allows you to become aware of your emotions. Care about them as valid. Realize that they have a good reason to be here. Grieving teaches you to be empathetic towards yourself and learn what feels safe for you. It invites unconditional love into your life, through which you can let go of the hurt and live more fully in the present without being trapped in the past. Next time negative emotions overwhelm you, you become better and better at giving yourself a good advice instead of a bad advice, like you would do to someone else you care about, so do it for yourself too. It may take a bit of time, but that's okay. You don't need to reach a specific destination. Life is a process. Your healing is a process. Simply be. Forgive yourself and try to release all forms of self-blame, shame, humiliation. Meditations can help you. Even if you find 5 minutes here and there, imagining how this black smoke of negativity and trauma are leaving your energy field, you will feel lighter and more optimistic about the world. You will notice the difference when your beliefs begin to change from "I'm damaged" to "I'm scarred but I'm healing," from "I better hide my pain" to "I understand that my emotional pain will pass, it's not permanent," from "I'm unworthy and useless" to "I'm a unique human being, there's no one exactly like me." This is also a good time to release anger you've been holding inside and what it really represents. Imagine a situation. A 13-year-old boy has been sexually abused by his piano teacher for 2 years. So it started when he was 11. This teacher is a very respectable musician with plentiful of awards and solid reputation. A very nice guy, always happy to help, friendly, supportive. Sometimes the boy, let's call him Toby, goes to teacher's house for lessons. Sometimes the teacher comes to his house, and sometimes they meet in the studio. A few years forward, Toby is an adult now and is going through his recovery journey. And he realizes he's feeling enormous anger not only towards the abuser, but also towards his parents for not seeing the signs and for not protecting him. When he disclosed the abuse to them on his birthday turning 14, yes, his parents got really worried and supportive. They made sure this piano teacher goes to prison, and they begged Toby for forgiveness multiple times. But as an adult, Toby is still angry at them, despite all the efforts to punish the abuser and apologize. He understands that this anger is irrational, especially after all these years, but he can't help it and he can't ignore it anymore because unresolved anger manifests as other types of self-destructive behaviors. He also can't just go and scream at his parents, swear at them, maybe even hit them because he will become abusive. But he sees only these options because he uses his anger as a weapon, not as a tool. Seeing his anger as a tool would mean realizing that this anger is felt from his perspective at the time of the abuse, not from the perspective of an adult he is now. Illogical, yes, but feelings they don't follow logic. His 13-year-old wants his parents now. He wants them to notice strange things about the piano teacher now. He wants them to ask questions why he was 1 hour late coming from his house. He wants them to be worried and suspicious now. These sensations of rage are the product of his past need for protection that wasn't fulfilled or was fulfilled too late when the damage was already done. Toby needs to talk to his parents without being abusive and explain to them how the negligence and lack of awareness truly affected him, that he feels deeply hurt and that he needs their protection. And together they need to figure out what to do in the future to avoid situations in which Toby feels unprotected and ignored by his parents. Regardless of his age, his parents, they still need to pay attention to their son and his needs, not to patronize him, but to validate him, and especially when his mood is slightly off and something clearly bothers him. Sincere, open communication, that's the lesson for this family. And Toby can also channel his rage into a career or volunteer to protect children from abuse through various organizations and charities. And to reclaim his need for protection, he will require work with his inner child. Our child spirit we all have within us, even when we are adults, is a symbol of our emotional body. Children, they feel the world. They don't rationalize as adults do. When children feel pain, they can't just simply objectify it, explain it rationally. For them, it's an energy, it's a feeling, it's not a thought. Working with your inner child means you need to face the side of you that has been neglected. Re-experience it through your memory from a safe place. Validate your inner child's feelings. Feel them like you would when you were little. Provide support and unconditional love to your small self, despite what you're feeling, whether you agree with it or not, whether it's good or bad. Don't label anything, just feel and accept. Understand what the child is asking for and meet your child's needs in real time. Now you're an adult. The last thing I would like to mention is, in order to heal from sex abuse, make sure you establish which sexual practices are safe, possibly safe and unsafe for you. Make a list of them and begin your sexual rehab by allowing what feels safe for you right now. What is considered safe for you will fluctuate as you progress in your recovery. That's normal. Also, among abuse survivors, what is comfortable and what is not will differ. So hear only yourself here and don't compare yourself to others. There is no right or wrong way to be sensual or sexual. Just be you. Your goal is to recognize negative triggers and provide a secure space for yourself. And as you continue to work through these stages, through your dissociation, guilt, shame, grief, anger, you will experience more awareness, integration, and compassion for yourself. You will gain the ability to move towards a better future. For now, I wish you the strength to leave all chaos behind you and find harmony you deserve. See you soon, my wonderful souls. Bye.